So welcome back to the Friendly Circle Berlin. And my name is Patrick, and I'd like to welcome everyone to a very special day for us because we're thrilled to have you here and to have are very honored to have Dr. Ingrid Clayton, a psychologist, author, and fierce trauma educator, as she helps us discover new possibilities for recovery. Ingrid is a true friend of our Friendly Circle Berlin, having joined us many times before here on our Monday workshops, as well as spending some real quality time with us in London last May at our annual conference, which was an unforgettable experience for me and many others who are here today. That's the truth. And today, Ingrid will share insights from her upcoming book on fawning. The title of the book is Fawning, the trauma response that makes us lose ourselves in order to stay safe, and how we can reclaim our voice, boundaries, and sense of self. So we sent out a questionnaire in advance, which Ingrid will now address. Your questions touched on so many powerful themes like breaking generational trauma, how fawning fits in 12-step recovery, the deep link between shame and people-pleasing, navigating sensitive or difficult situations in emotionally charged relationships, and finding the path back to authenticity. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ingrid Clayton. Ingrid, it's great to see you. Thank you for doing this. Much appreciated. And let me spotlight you and get you unmuted.
Unmuted. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you guys so much for having me back. I love this group so much. I know it's not uncommon for me to get emotional, but I can just see myself sort of sobbing in front of the group in London, just overwhelmed by this really deeply safe place that you have created. I love that you start the workshop with the set aside prayer. I mean, if anything else embodies sort of what I believe in, it's that. That's been my own personal process of recovery. It's been necessary for me not just to set aside things that I learned and did before recovery, but things that I learned and did in recovery, things that were taught to me as recovery. I've had to continually go, wait a second, that's now standing in my way. Wait a second, that's standing in my way. So I'm sure that I have met a lot of you in person or on this group or maybe through social media, but I figured for those that aren't as familiar, I would just give a little introduction to me and my work. So as Patrick said, yeah, my name is Ingrid, and this year I'm the class of 1995. God willing, I'll be celebrating 30 years sober. I went away this weekend actually with two of my girlfriends. We each got sober in different places, but we found each other here in LA, and one was visiting. She has since moved because each of us are celebrating 30 years of recovery this year. So what a gift that was to go and spend time with them and really reflect on what that means, right? 3 decades of sobriety. And I've also spent time in and out of other programs, including Al-Anon and DA or BDA, Business Owners, Debtors Anonymous. And without a doubt, I would say that, recovery and sobriety is my foundation. I would not be here today if I hadn't stayed sober. I come from a very active alcoholic family, and it's just a true gift. My sobriety is a true gift. And then somewhere along the way in my sobriety, I learned that I wasn't stupid, which is what I thought that I was for most of my life. I almost failed out of high school. I felt like I couldn't really read a book. I wasn't that interested. But through the steps and sponsorship, it was encouraged, like, you're interested in this therapy thing. Why don't you go back to school? So after 12 years, I think it was, and 5 schools, I finally finished my undergraduate degree. And in sobriety, I learned that I love learning and that I love participating in this larger conversation. And I continued on and got a master's degree in transpersonal psychology and a PhD in clinical psychology. I live in LA. I've been in private practice, oh gosh, 16 years now, I think. I've worked in inpatient settings and outpatient settings prior to that. Um, I worked in addiction for a long time. And if you work in addiction for a long time, you eventually find yourself working in trauma. And that has become my focus, is now I'm a trauma therapist and I work mostly with complex trauma, which is synonymous with relational trauma, developmental trauma, childhood trauma. Okay, so that's a bit of that story arc. And then I will say, in terms of this relationship now between being a therapist and someone in recovery, when I went to grad school, I ended up doing my dissertation research on spiritual bypass or spiritual bypassing, which is a defense mechanism where you use your spiritual practice or ideas to avoid your feelings. And so I heard about this concept in grad school and I was like, you're blowing my mind. Like, what are you talking about? I might potentially be using my spiritual practice to avoid myself in the same way that I was using drugs and alcohol, essentially. And I kind of looked around and said, you know what? I know I'm not the only one here. And so I did my research with people who had 10 or more years of sobriety, um, and their experience with spiritual bypass. And my first book is called Recovering Spirituality. It's on that topic. But basically, for me, that was where the seed was planted of like, gosh, I thought I was just being a good girl in recovery. So that when I said, hey, I'm feeling all these things or I'm having these experiences, and I heard, well, just go pray about it, and then I would pray about it and I would be like, but I don't know. I still have these feelings and I'm still struggling. Well, have you prayed on your knees? You know what? You should put your keys under your bed and then it'll make you get down on your knee. Oh, okay. I need to pray on my knees, right? Oh, I'm only meditating for 3 minutes. Maybe I need to meditate for 10 minutes or I need to do this particular type of meditation. There was just a lot of reflection back to me that what I was experiencing, I needed to kind of try harder or do better with my spiritual practice, which ultimately led to this overriding of myself, sort of like looking spiritual and appearing spiritual and using the spiritual talk, but I was still disconnected from self. And this override, now I know, perpetuated my experience of unresolved complex trauma. Because if I couldn't attend to the muck and really be in it, and it's not that I wasn't sharing honestly, but it's like you would share honestly for 3 minutes, and then the solution was like, now go button it up with these spiritual practices. So, um, this ultimately, I can see now started to plant the seed for when I became a trauma therapist and I learned about the fawning trauma response, which we're going to talk about today. It was this bigger sort of opening, this underlying thing that I was like, this is what was foundational my whole life prior to recovery, in recovery. This was the piece for me and ultimately many of my clients that felt like it unlocked something that allowed me to make sense to myself, that allowed me to stop overriding who I am, what I need, what I'm feeling. Um, for those that come from the 12-step world, in addition to that spiritual bypass idea, there was a lot of, anger is a luxury. And it's sort of like, oof, what I now know is that in the fawn response, we've been so disconnected from our anger that we actually have to learn to connect to tend to our anger in a healthy way, maybe for the first time. And so it can feel kind of incongruent, right, with these other messages that you're receiving. And so a lot of my path and now these 30 years has been about coming to a place where it's like I do all the things and I do them so earnestly. And I went to outside help. I sat on a lot of therapist couches, but no one was looking at me through the lens of trauma. There was more similar kind of behavioral intervention, and and I lost track there, so I'm going to stop that train of thought. Okay, so Then I hear about the fawn response. For those of you that don't know, the term itself was coined by Pete Walker. He's a psychotherapist specializing in complex trauma, complex PTSD. He has a book, I think it's called Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. And he has some great writing online that on his website. And I spoke with him years ago now about how he coined this term. And as a trauma therapist, and most of us are familiar with fight, flight, and freeze, right? This is very much in the vernacular. And you can turn to the animal kingdom because these are at heart animal defenses. And you can see the fight response, the flight response, and the freeze response. And Pete Walker was actually watching some sort of a nature documentary, and he saw, I think it was a pack of wolves and this outlier wolf. And he thought, oh gosh, is he gonna run? Are they gonna go at it? And that's not what happened. This outlier wolf was kind of like, hey guys, like, what you doing? Like he saw this wolf start to kind of appease and shapeshift and big sandwich board, like, friendly, more friend than foe. And he sort of thought, I have seen this before in my practice. I know this response. It kind of just clicked in for him that this wolf even was having this instinctual, reflexive, biological response in the moment to keeping himself safe. And then, as Pete's like pondering all these details, he turns around, he walks to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and he kicks the foot of his couch, when you like, and it hurts so bad. And he immediately apologized to the couch. And these things kind of came together. And he's like, this is what this is, right? It's sort of like my whole body, when it feels pain, when it feels potential threat, when it feels, relational harm, it goes into this state of, you matter more than me. Your needs matter more than mine. How can I serve you, help you, um, become the thing that you need me to be so that you like me, and maybe so you like me just enough, but I also have to try to assert a boundary at the same time. So it looks different depending on the context. Um, it looks different depending on the individual, right? What their particular wiring is. None of the trauma responses are mutually exclusive. They're all available to all of us, but the body chooses the one in a nanosecond that it believes will be the most successful in the moment. And then if it works, the body goes, got it, right? So that's the one that got me through unscathed. I'm going to do that again. And so fawning in particular as a relational trauma response is very common for childhood trauma survivors or anyone who's experienced complex trauma, complex meaning ongoing, pervasive relational trauma. If you are in repeated traumatic situations day in, day out, you're not safe. Your caregivers, your parents are the ones that you're not safe with. And your response is the fawn response. Your developing body knows this is the thing that keeps me safe. And so for a lot of us, we don't actually know, where do I end and where does fawning begin? It starts just to feel like it's personality, right? Like it was never a choice to begin with. It's not a conscious choice. Just like we look at the animal kingdom and we see the one who's fighting or the one who's running, like um those animals don't stop and ponder, like, am I being ridiculous right now? Maybe I'm overreacting, right? The body feels the threat and it reacts. And the same is true with the fawn response. So when I heard of this lens, and essentially, and Pete Walker would say that fawning is the sort of heartbeat, the root of what we've long talked about as codependency, or even what we've talked about in terms of people pleasing. And being a therapist, being in recovery, I've certainly heard these terms, I've identified with these terms, but I've also been like, there's something missing here, right? there felt like, first of all, there was a lot of shame that went hand in hand with these terms for me, right? So you hear about like, you're a codependent. Well, you have a disease. Well, why don't you just take care of yourself and set a boundary and grow some self-esteem? And here are these 10 ways that you can do that, right? Like, if only it were that simple. I did all the things. I wrote all the affirmations. I looked in the mirror longingly at myself and tried to find, a deep connection. And at the end of the day, I'd go out in the world and my body didn't feel safe. So my body didn't care about my opinion or how long I was trying to sort of work on self-love from this conscious place. I needed to attend to myself through the lens and language of trauma, which is embodied, right? It made all the difference. I needed to understand that my experiences growing up were actually traumatic. And like a lot of folks, we go, was it really that bad? I mean, I know so many people who have had it so much worse, and my parents did their best, or whatever these things are. We talk ourselves out of that language. And the really unfortunate thing about that to me is that then we talk ourselves out of the tools, the paradigms that can actually help us heal, right? So, um, trauma, we don't get access to that word because we experienced a particular event that, everyone would agree. We use that word really based on our symptoms. What am I experiencing now? That's the thing that tells me that whatever that event was or whatever those events were manifested in a way that overwhelmed my nervous system and has created an experience of unresolved trauma and a prolonged experience of living in a trauma response, as opposed to being feeling internally safe, where I have conscious agency and I have a voice, right? So, um, I'm wondering if I've covered that enough. This is the tricky part when it's all just me as a talking head. Um, Maybe I will turn to some of the questions and I think they'll help sort of flesh this stuff out. And then I do want to make sure I leave room because I want to make sure that what I've said is clear. Um, and I'm going to have to scoot the screen over to look at the questions. And sure enough, the first question is going to expand on what I've just said. So the question is fawning a form of dissociation? How does dissociation relate to fawning? It's an excellent question. So what I did not say is fawning is a hybrid trauma response. So if you look at fight or flight, these are very adrenalized, mobilizing, your heart is racing trauma responses. It's what we call hyper arousal, right? The body's like, go. And then at the other end of that spectrum is hypo arousal, which is dissociation, which is a down regulation. It's depression. It's hypoarousal. So fawning is a hybrid of these two things, okay? And this too is what kind of blew my mind once I really understood what that meant. I think we are threading such a very fine needle when we fawn. We are not turning to fight or flight, likely because it would make it worse, right? So as the body's discerning, like, oh, what do I do here to stay safe? For a lot of people, children, women, people of color, anyone who's disempowered, right? The body kind of understands where we are on the hierarchy. And it goes, oh, fighting back is going to make it worse. Where am I going to run? There's nowhere to go, right? So I can't be fully active. And might have a sense that if I completely go offline, well, I have to show up day in, day out, right? I have to see my caregivers every morning. I have to show up to that toxic work environment because I need a paycheck, right? It's like you cannot disconnect completely. So the active hyperarousal of fawning is that we're often hypervigilant, right? We are tracking the environment. We know your mood and we know that you came in without a smile on your face, like we are tracking. And we sort of shape shift into what we need to, oh, I need to make sure that you're feeling better because I need you to endorse what I'm doing or validate or give me permission or, not attack me. I need to smile. I need to tap dance. I need to perform. There's a performative aspect, right? It's very engaged. That's one hand of fawning. The other side is this disconnection. And this is the heartbreaking piece because the dissociation and the disconnection is ultimately from our highest need, our, you know, our value system. We end up self-abandoning. If you look at all of sort of the signs and symptoms of fawning, there's this conflict avoidance and a hypervigilance and all these things. Uh, is self-abandonment. It sort of underlies all of these things. And so that to me is the dissociative piece. Now, where you are in terms of how much hyper, how much hypo, it is so individual. It's going to look different again, depending on your body and depending on the context. But typically, it's these two things threading together in order to make us as relationally safe as possible in the moment. And then for those of you like me who then are chronically living in this place because the body goes, I am never going to be that unsafe again, right? This thing worked enough. And so I'm going to keep leaning there and I'm going to keep fawning for you and you and you, even when no threat is present. That's what we're doing, right? So great question. All right, the next one. Let's see. When I stop fawning, how can I show the talker that I am interested in what she is saying? Is there a substitute for fawning? And then they say presence, question mark. It's two questions, so maybe I'll answer that one first. How can I show the talker that I'm interested? I mean, I just love that even that question is a bit of like a fawning question. It's like, I still need to make sure that they know that I'm here for them or that I'm attending to them, that I'm listening, but I want to do it in less of a fawning way, which to me is sort of this unconscious way. So curiosity is, to me, one of my favorite tools. Ask the talker. If you don't feel like they know, if you are genuinely worried, if it's like preoccupying your mind and you're kind of coming out of what feels like a performative state and you're engaging with someone, if it's a safe person, you can say, you know what, I'm practicing not plastering a smile on my face all the time or nodding like this so that you know, but now I feel a little bit worried. Like, how do you know that I'm engaged, right? I would just say drop down into the reality of the moment and ask, be curious for one. For two, I don't think we have to manage these things to the extent that we've always managed them. So it's also a bit of a practice, right? If you look at the relation to people and you go, well, here's me and here's you, and there's this overlap space. Fawners are so used to like occupying all the overlap and thinking it's our responsibility, right? And we do that in advance to preserve the relationship, to not get in trouble, right? To stave off conflict. So part of what I'm asking fawners to do, and this is hard, it's hard for me, is to get out of the way enough to go, maybe there's going to be some conflict. Maybe we have to tolerate that if I'm sitting here like this and I'm not like, right? Maybe someone's going to go, Ingrid, are you pissed off? Like, are you listening? In other words, I can let them manage their part of this overlapping space. And then I can attend to it honestly, right? I can go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you asked, or no, I'm completely present. Why? What were you experiencing? Which leads to more real intimacy, real connection, and real reciprocal relationship, which is what a lot of us have not fully experienced, right? So, that was a big answer for a short question, but it was so good. Okay, and then what effect does fawning have on the person talking to me? I always thought it would be reassuring, but maybe not. I think you ask 10 different people, they're going to give you maybe 10 different answers. Some people are like, I cannot stand it when they know when someone is fawning for them. And they're just like, ugh, it feels so disingenuous. I want to actually know how you feel, not what you think you need to say to make me think dot, 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 right? So there's that end of the spectrum. There's the other far, far end of the spectrum. If someone is exploiting you or abusing you, they probably love your fawn response. They're probably like, bring it all day long, right? It really works for me that you don't really have a sense of self and that you're going to cater. If I move over here, you're going to move over here. If I move over, right? So it depends on the person, right? That's the effect that it has. But I'm less interested. Part of unfawning is being less interested in how you're perceiving me and how you're perceiving me. And what about you? Am I doing a good job? And going, how am I perceiving me? How does it feel to be in my own skin, in my body, to maybe say an opinion that I know might not be your opinion, right? Or that this is the freedom. Fawners are so oriented to external validation and permission, right? That's why these questions, I go, oh my gosh, these are questions I would say from a fawner because we're going, but how do I still make sure, that they're doing okay or that I'm perceived in a good light? And part of unfawning is going, yes, that's true. I'm probably always going to wonder about those things, but can I at least be equally curious? How do I feel about me? How do I feel about what I'm saying right now? Um, that's the shift. Okay. Why do I overgive to everyone? And why am I so loyal to my dysfunctional family and have supported them all my life to my detriment? I can't get out of the chaos. Yeah. So over giving, over extending, we overwork, we over volunteer. Let me take on your workload. No, no big deal. I got it. Again, if you go back to that Venn diagram idea of there's me and then there's them, and then there's this overlap. The fawner goes, I have to attend to all of this overlap because that's the only way my needs are going to be met. So again, if we look at fawning as a relational trauma response, often common in childhood, we are hardwired for attachment. It's just how we come into the world. Human beings are more dependent on our caregivers. We are longer dependent on our caregivers than any other species. If they were not available, right? If they were emotionally immature, if they were actively addicted, if they were narcissistic, if they are steeped in their own generational trauma and don't know it, and they are not available to us, the child has to adapt and go, well, I can't make you deficient as my caregiver because I literally need you to survive. And so we soak up the shame, we soak up what's not working, we make it our responsibility. In other words, it allowed us to survive. This is an aspect of the fawn response, right? I cannot count on you completely. So I'm going to sort of do whatever work I can do so that I can count on the parts of you that I still need. And I'm just reading the question again. But this is part of that pattern, right? That we are so used to overdoing, overgiving just to barely get enough that our body goes, if I pull back on overdoing, overgiving, right? If all of that work on my end only got my needs met this much by other people, what the hell's going to happen if I pull back? Honestly, in the body, it feels like death. It feels like that's impossible. So again, the unfawning process I'm saying is so brave, and it's why we go slow and why we do it with a trauma-informed lens and why you don't just pull off the band-aid and go out there and assert yourself. We go, no, 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 no. We've got to begin by building real relationship to self, by building a sense of internal safety, maybe for the first time ever, right? And we go slow and we do it baby steps at a time. And again, that speaks to the second part of the question, uh, supporting them all of your life to your detriment, right? Um, and that's why it's so hard to move the needle, because moving the needle, there's a sense of I'm gonna make it worse. I'm gonna make it worse. And it might feel worse initially. I'm not gonna lie. That's been my experience. It's been the experience of a lot of my clients. Okay, Ingrid, I've heard you share about your experience with AA and 12 steps and how it sadly feels emotionally unsafe to be in a typical meeting. This resonated a lot with me. I'm grateful for the validation it helped me to give to myself. I recently heard and read about another program which is called the 16 Steps program, and which seems to be fitting a lot more for women's typical experiences. I think also for people with more fawning in their wiring than the men who originally created AA. I'll just speak to that. I spoke at the conference in London and sort of shared that. Of course, I don't know, but it makes sense to me that the 99 men who came together to write the steps initially and the one woman were likely given, time in history and their own symptoms, they were likely more conditioned for a fight response. And that's why a lot of the steps were geared more towards, be of service, like get out of yourself, lean towards other people, because that's a nice antidote to an overactive fight response, which is just like, I'm uh, sort of shamelessly making a mess and have too much of a voice, and it's all about me. Um, and yet, when you give that same message to people that are stuck in a chronic fawn response, just be of service, just get out of yourself. Based on what I've already said, you can kind of tell, like, oh, that might be problematic. You might be suggesting more of the problem than a solution for fawners. So they said they think that this 12 or 16 steps program might be more helpful. Have you heard about it? And if yes, have you tried it or felt like it could be a healing alternative? I'm curious about your thoughts. I have not heard of this. Now I'm super curious about it. Um, generally speaking, I love that just as your group is open to let's talk about all of the ways there's no such thing as an outside issue. I think, bigger picture, we're becoming more trauma informed in lots of different ways and spaces. And so I'm just excited to know about it, and I'll have to check it out. And maybe you will too. Okay. How to snap out of the fawning trance. That's a good question. And it is a bit of a trance, isn't it? I haven't thought about it that way. Um, what's a little bit tricky about this work, but it's also what makes it helpful, I think, is that it's not a one size fits all, right? I'm writing this, well, I've written the book now, but it is technically a self-help book. And I use my story. I use 7 clients' stories, like really going in and doing a deep dive, like where they came from, how that led to chronic fawning, what it looked like to come out. But what you'll see in the diversity of stories is the diversity of how they came out of their own fawning trance. And so that does not translate to me saying, well, here are the very specific things that you can do that apply to everyone. But I think similar to what was probably most helpful for me in the beginning of recovery is I don't even know my story. I don't even know what I'm doing until I hear other people talk about it, right? When we go to a meeting and you go, oh, I know what they're talking about. Suddenly you go, I didn't even know that thing about myself. It's why I tend to teach through story and even my own personal experience, because I think it's the thing that can help to unlock and to bring more consciousness around what we're doing and why we're doing it. So my biggest hope is just in sharing this language, sharing these lived experiences. It's not theoretical in that way. It's like, no, this is what it looked like for this person and this person. Um, Sharing those pieces can help people come out of the trance because they go, I didn't even know I was in a trance, right? Like, I thought I was just being nice. I thought I was just patient and caring and meeting expectations and was very generous. And here's the truth. Fawners are often all of those things, right? And we don't know the extent to which we lean hard in those directions at the expense of self. And if it's at the expense of self, it's not really generous. It's not really kind. It's not really caring because it doesn't include who we are and what we need. And so, even just that sort of curiosity around recalibration can start to move the needle quite a bit. What is the definition of people pleasing and how to differentiate from being polite or other similar behavior? So I kind of just spoke to that actually. If it is overriding who you are and what you need and how you feel, that to me is the difference, right? Between being genuinely polite and caring and giving. And it's not to say that there are circumstances certainly where a fawn response is appropriate. I guess that's the other thing I need to make clear. When I use language like fawning or unfawning, I'm absolutely wanting to get out of this BS black and white, all or nothing paradigm that a lot of us live in. Like, are you healed? Or are you unhealed? Right? It's like I identify as a fawner because I'm always going to have this body. This body was wired to a great deal towards a fawn response. It's probably always going to be like some level of go-to, right? I just shared on my Instagram, I don't know how long ago now, a month or so ago. Oh my gosh, it happened again in such a big way. And because it's not conscious, I didn't intend to do it. It happened without my knowing. And often we get more clarity in hindsight. It's like, oh my gosh, that's what was going on. Um, and I'm not mad about it, right? It kept me safe in those conditions. And we're not meant to live in a trauma response 24/7. That's survival mode, right? So I don't live in that space all the time. That's the difference. Um, and there's a time and a place for consciously knowing that, you know what, this isn't the safest of relationships, or it's temporary, or it's whatever your conditions are, where you go, yeah, I'm not bringing my it's not about bringing our full authentic self at any cost all the time. That's also not the goal. It's like, it's about self-honoring. And sometimes self-honoring means saying, you know what? I don't need to insert my genuine opinion here. I can just smile and let the conversation move on. The difference is I'm doing it with conscious choice. I'm doing it with a sense of agency. I don't feel like if I were to say what I actually mean, I would absolutely be steamrolled, in all conditions. That's the difference. And fawning is also sometimes referred to as the please and appease response. So when it says this sort of definition between people pleasing, I think the only difference to me, and maybe someone will share some more nuance here, but the only difference for me between fawning and people pleasing is that fawning actually has the roots of our physiology and the context of our lives. It takes all of that into consideration, as opposed to people pleasing or even codependency that feels like it's like gotten rid of the context, it's gotten rid of our physiology and just made it like we're a problem that came out of nowhere. And like, why would you do that? Like, why would you care what people think about you? Right? Like, oh my God, why would you think it? And it's like, well, because I came from these conditions where my body learned that if I didn't take all the blame, I wasn't safe, right? And you go, oh, okay. And so now safety is equated with that same behavior. I don't know a sense of safety. And so people that are coming at us with these criticisms, I kind of go, well, gosh, all that says to me is that you haven't had to fawn to stay safe. Because if you did, you would know that the criticisms that you're lobbing at us are, it's kind of absurd when you think about it. Um, Gosh, I love all these questions and I love being here with you, but it's also hard that I'm just talking at myself the whole time. I'm just going to say that out loud. I'm hoping that it's landing, but I'm going to leave space so you can ask And we can be in relationship. I guess that's the part that I'm um, missing a little bit, but that's okay. All right. Sometimes taking care of myself and doing what I need to do means that my partner will be disappointed since I won't be giving him what he wants, needs, or desires. His needs are in conflict with my needs. I try to take care of myself, but how do I tolerate the discomfort of disappointing him in that instance? Oh my gosh, this person just kind of answered their own question just by naming what we have to do. They use the word tolerate. I use the word tolerate often on purpose, right? So that's the other thing that sometimes I think gets lost in some of the codependency or people pleasing literature. It's like, just take care of yourself. Like it feels like a victory lap. Like you're like, I have a voice and, I know who I am. And it's like this coming out party kind of a thing. But what we're coming out to is other people's disappointment. And especially if you've been reflexively meeting their needs more than your own, this is a huge pivot where suddenly you're like, I'm not just going to caretake what I know you need and what you want me to do because it would make things sort of easier. I'm not going to go along to get along. I'm actually going to go along as myself and bring myself to the table. And it's going to feel really hard. And so, what does it look like to tolerate? I go, ooh, this is maybe where nervous system regulation comes in. And I probably shared this with y'all. I share it all the time. For me, the self-compassionate stance of putting my hand on my heart tends to make me want to take a deeper, spontaneous breath, sort of orienting to my surroundings. The language of the nervous system is the senses, right? It's not like cognitive, articulate language, it's the senses. So orient to your surroundings. What do I see, hear, taste, smell? And linger where it feels maybe pleasant or even neutral. I often orient to the natural environment because it makes me feel contained, it makes me feel connected. And this starts to create more of a sense of internal safety in the body, right? Because the body's going, well, this feels threatening. I'm disappointing this person. But at the same time, I'm looking around, I'm not really in danger, right? So this is a lot of healing relational trauma and coming out of a fawn response is learning to discern, is this dangerous or is this discomfort? And we see this a lot with emotional sobriety. It's about widening our tolerance for discomfort. And the other thing I'll just say, because it came to mind, to me, walking and walking in nature are two of the most powerful things that I do for myself to help me tolerate all of the messiness of what it means to be in a body and to process some of these things and to be with myself in some of these things. So that's one of the things I do. And I think I'll probably speak to more tools as we get through some of the questions. Question: is there a connection between fawning and difficulty being present during and enjoying sex? The answer is yes. Yes, there's a connection. A backstory, they said, despite a healthy 25-plus-year marriage with an open and loving partner, no history of physical or sexual abuse or substance addiction, I don't experience much pleasure in my body. I suspect my long history of and recent realization about my extreme codependency is connected to this. My instincts tell me there might be an approach through the polyvagal theory that could be helpful. Gosh, I love this question. So I actually talk in a section of the book about sexual fawning, and that presents differently for different people. But in essence, a lot of the time, if we're fawning because we're coming from a disempowered place, right? And I need to be who you need me to be so that you can, validate me or feel validated yourself. And particularly, I see this for women, but it's not gendered. but particularly women who have been sexualized as their only sort of currency or form of power, the body goes, got it, there's my value, right? I need to be appealing to you, attractive to you, sexy to you, a fantasy object for you. And that can be a part of the reflexive response. It sort of turns to a sexual presentation, which also means during sex, we're hyper focused on your pleasure, your sensation. I share client stories in the book where they talk about not even feeling a partner's hands on their body, right? Talk about this disconnect from your own sense of pleasure. You're not sensing physical touch and like what it feels like to your body. She would be mapping out, I need to remember where they were touching me and how they were touching me so that tomorrow I can go and touch myself in the same way and see what that body part felt like to them. That's how disconnected from the physical act of sex, how much they were only focused on their partner. So there is this process then. We're going to catch ourselves reflexively going, well, are they enjoying themselves? You know, do they think I'm sexy or attractive? Or what do they see? What do they feel? Is it good enough? Is it okay? And then we go, okay, what do I see? What do I feel? Can I start just to be curious? And it's again, it's not all or nothing, but maybe we drop in just for a moment and we get curious during and maybe after. Well, how was it for me to notice myself in that? And maybe it's not noticing in, the traditional sex life that you've had. Maybe it's like turning to your partner of 25 plus years and going, can we practice what it feels like if I just give you my hand? Non-sexual, in other words. Can I practice what it's like just receiving physical touch and noticing what comes up in me? And we can even just like set a timer and do it for 2 minutes, and then we can practice and I can do it with you too. Because I notice that there's a part of me that disconnects from physical touch and I'd like to be more present for it. And so for a lot of us, we have to build that for the first time. So starting slow and small and contained is one way to do it. That's such an important question. I really appreciate it. Also, polyvagal theory. There's a lot of questions in here that relate to polyvagal theory, which I love. And just in full candor, it's not my lens and language, polyvagal theory. So mostly what I say for anyone that says, hey, do you think this would be helpful? Regardless of what it is, I go, I wonder if it's helpful for you, right? So I am sharing what I know about this world, but that doesn't mean that I have all the answers or again, that it's super prescriptive. It's like, I am genuinely encouraging people to notice what you're curious about. Notice your own nudges. Notice what connects you to self. This is some of the most, one thing in 12 steps we've always sort of held on to is to thine own self be true. This work with fawning and unfawning has allowed me to deepen my relationship to that like nothing else. It's only to thine own self be true. My way is probably not going to be someone else's way. Let's face it, my way was going all the traditional routes and sitting on all the therapist couches and being sober for decades and however many 12-step programs I was doing. And ultimately, what I really needed to do was be called to go write a memoir on childhood trauma, right? It really was the most healing and helpful thing I ever did for myself. It unlocked all of these other doors I didn't even know were there to begin with. And there's a similar telling to everyone's story. It's so unique. It's this moment that happened or that relationship or right? So, if you feel curious, if you feel called, my suggestion is go check it out. And then bring back again that what constant external focus of like, well, do you think this works? Or what do you think of me to going, how did I experience that? Bring it, bring it back to your own body. Okay, I'm gonna take a drink. All right. How does neurodiversity relate to fawning? Are neurodiverse people more likely to fawn? So, another great question. Um, Different folks I've heard give different answers to this. So, I'm going to say some people equate fawning with masking, with camouflaging. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So the neurodiverse person instinctively knows, well, this, I don't, I don't know or intuit these sort of, social hierarchies. Doesn't make any sense to me, but I see that you're responding to the teacher this way, or I've gotten enough feedback that my tone is too flat and I'm coming across as sharp and it doesn't seem like so, oh, I need to like have a higher tone of voice and I need to, you know, there that masking very much is a fawn response. Some would say there are some differences and it also makes sense that it's a threat response, right? So you're going, I keep getting in trouble. People keep saying that I'm X, Y, and Z. I don't want to keep feeling that way or, being kind of punished in that way. So the body adapts. There are some people who speak to some differences in terms of masking and fawning around the consciousness of it. So I'm going to let that community and even individuals speak to their own relationship to that. But I have talked about masking and also code switching as what feel to me like really relevant, elegant examples of the fawn response in particular contexts. And what I like about both masking and code switching in terms of language is that they both hold the context. You know that you're masking for a reason because our world was built for neurotypical folks, right? You know that people of color are code switching because the world was built for white people, right? That's the hierarchy there. So um, anyway, I think that's all I have to say on the neurodiversity piece. Ingrid, what do you recommend, for example, approaches, communities, books, resources, self-help methods, etc., to address the major aftermath of chronic pain, fatigue, and functional freeze? So, again, generally speaking, I'm a trauma therapist. I'm going to tell you, I think trauma therapies or deeply trauma-informed communities and clinicians, that would be sort of my baseline hope for folks. Um, but beyond that, I think there's such a diversity of approaches, communities, books, resources, self-help methods. I say if you're curious, um, check it out and see what moves the needle. I have referenced in Fawning the modalities that I use, that I have used personally or as a clinician, including somatic experiencing, internal family systems, and EMDR. I love things about all of them. There are things about all of them that don't necessarily work for different clients at different points in time. Um, I tend to be less of a purist kind of a person and go, I like a little of this, I like a little of this, and it all starts to sort of inform what I believe and hold about other modalities, and it all starts to kind of work together. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of resources on my website too. Check it out. There's books and links to podcasts and things. Um, but I don't hold hard and fast to like, this is the way. Um, are fawning and perfectionism related? If so, yes. Yes. If so, can you explain this relationship? More specifically, can you please speak to how it develops and then how we can unpack this in recovery? So it's not a hard and fast rule that fawning always leads to perfectionism. In fact, in fawning, we become what the environment calls for. And sometimes the environment calls for, we're all doing drugs. You need, to do them too. Or, you can think of all kinds of examples along those lines, right? It's not just about being good or being, smiley or caretaking. It's sort of like, what do I need to be to fit into this environment? Because being an outlier is unsafe. But for a lot of folks, the perfectionism is that, the bar is here. It's like, well, no, you need to be this. And then we go, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. And then we go, well, that didn't really fix it. So maybe it's this. And then we go, okay, I'm going to do that. Like we're really good at seeing the hoop and going, how can I jump through as quickly as possible? And so for a lot of people, one of the clients that I talk about in the book, he's a Harvard trained lawyer partner in this like global powerhouse firm. His resume is so impressive. It's a little bit like, whoo, like it can be intimidating. It was intimidating for me. And then I get to know this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, warmest, loveliest, one of the warmest, loveliest people I've ever met. But he was like, success was the answer, right? Because that was going to be the thing that finally he was hoping would lead to the kind of ease in relationships. Like, have I done enough? Am I now enough? Have I overdone enough? And yet, at the end of all of these successes, all of this literal perfectionism, he went and did all the things and he got married and he had the kid and he bought the house and the house had a pool or whatever it was. He was like, I am not me. And I don't even like this law firm or certainly this area of law. And I don't want to be the person at the firm who's picking up all the slack and doing right. He just found that his whole life had been built around this idea that maybe one day he'll be enough, can do enough to where he could finally be himself. And he found that, in fact, he was continuing to override who he actually was. And as is often the case, then there's a real grief process when we go, I have fawned for you and you and you in all these different ways. Maybe it's financially, maybe it's this compulsive caretaking where it's like, no, I've got it and let me pay. And how can I? And maybe it's sexually, maybe it's, I don't get to have any emotional needs because you have so many emotional needs. So it's no big deal, right? I've got it. It presents in all these different ways. But ultimately, when we've lived in that space for so long and you look back on a life that was built on overriding who you are and what you need, there tends to be a real grief process. Um, and again, I realize I'm asking people to go towards these places that can be painful, but I would not advocate for any of it if I didn't know firsthand and through working with countless people now that it was so abundantly, unbelievably worth it.
I just want to thank you, Ingrid. It feels like you've opened up new ground with this book.
I hope so. I feel like my memoir was really me sort of crawling out from underneath a lot of this, and I'm so grateful for that. I couldn't have written the book on fawning if I hadn't have written the memoir, but the fawning book to me, it's like, oh my, it's my heart on the page, it's my client's heart on the page. It's like all of my work, personal and professional, up until this moment. I'm really genuinely proud of it, and I'm so grateful that people are interested. And as an author, right, that this whole pre-order business, I know it's not really exciting to go and order a book and then be like, but I'm not going to get it until when? But in terms of helping to spread this message, the pre-orders are the thing that determine the algorithms and how many, buys the stores are going to do. And maybe if nothing else, go to your local library and ask them to get the Fawning book because it really helps to spread the word. And I'm so grateful to this group. All the work that you're doing, again, setting aside what we knew even 30 seconds ago and going, oh, wow, we have more information now, or I have more information now because I'm changed from who I was 30 seconds ago, and honoring that. Thank you for carrying the message in the way that I've really only experienced you guys as doing. It's a powerful, powerful group here. So thanks for having me back.
So, would you like to take us out on a reflection of some sort? And then we can open up so that everybody can say their thank yous.
Mm, what is the reflection that usually comes, that it's the thing that I want people to know and deeply experience, is that you make sense. I think I didn't feel like I made sense for so long because I kept doing all the things that people told me to do, and I still felt so stuck. So if you feel stuck, I want you to know you make sense. There's a reason. And I truly, truly hope, whether it's this framework or another, that you find your why and you understand the reason and you can be with it in a way that it can finally soften and bring you back into harmony with you.
Thank you, Ingrid.